country to developing and also to a better future.
Monday's announcement has given Southern Sudan international recognition. Organizations like the African Union, the Arab League and the European Union have given their support to the South and promised to develop the new country. But expectations here are high, and building a new nation will not be easy. A lot of work needs to be concluded before Independence Day on the 9th of July. Issues including the disputed border region of IBA, citizenship, border demarcation and oil sharing are some of the challenges. As Southerners here celebrate the birth of a new nation, resolving outstanding issues will determine how peaceful the transition to independence will be. Harun Matasa, Al Jazeera, Juba, Southern Sudan.
A bit of news, developing story out of the Indian Ocean. The Italian Navy says pirates have seized an Italian oil tanker. Now, this is about 800 kilometres off the coast of India, 1,200 kilometres off the coast of Somalia, which is, of course, where piracy is at its worst. A Navy spokesman says shots were fired at the ship, no injuries. At least 5 pirates believed to have taken part, 17 Indians, 5 Italians on board. So that appears to be a pirate hijacking in the Indian Ocean of an Italian oil tanker. To other news now. A separatist leader has claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing that killed 36 people at Russia's busiest airport last month. Speaking in a video carried by an Islamist website, Doku Umarov described the attack on Moscow's airport as a special operation directed against the Russian people and against its Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin. The latest now with Neve Barker, who's live in Moscow for us. Neve, tell us more what you know about this video and the man in it.
Well, Doku Umarov can only really just be described as the Kremlin's enemy number one. He is believed to be responsible, believed to be the mastermind behind a series of attacks, not only in the North Caucasus, but in other towns and cities across the country as well. He's believed to have ordered the Moscow metro bombings last year and is rumoured to have actually been present at the 2004 Beslan school massacre as well. Doku Umarov is essentially the nearest thing to an overall commander across the North Caucasus, uniting what would be isolated and divided insurgent groups. He's very much evaded capture over the years, despite the suggestion that he'd been killed at least twice. He's resurfaced and remains absolutely dedicated to the eventual aims of creating an independent Islamic State across the North Caucasus, something which the Russian authorities have time and time again insisted will not happen. Bloodshed in the coming future, in the words of Doku Umarov, appears to be the only way of continuing their onward battle.
So how then does Russia actively deal with this? Because taking on separatist groups inside your own borders, it's fraught, as we see in many battles all over the world.
It is indeed. I think that was one of the key responses by President Dmitry Medvedev and Prime Minister Putin, that, you know, regardless of how much security you have around places like airports and other transport hubs and public places, those bent on carrying out bomb attacks will carry out those attacks. Various security operatives have talked about the idea of introducing security checks on the borders with the North Caucasus themselves. But in the past, all of these various different attempts to contain the violence within the region have not worked. Various human rights groups have talked about the need to broaden the tactics being used by the Kremlin to really target perhaps the root of some of the key issues in that part of the world. Unemployment, particularly amongst the youth. Also accusations of police brutality that some people say is only making the situation worse, only adding to the cycle of violence.
Neve Barker with a live update from Moscow on the NewsHour. Thank you, Neve. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has arrived at court for the second day of an extradition hearing in the UK. He's wanted for questioning in Sweden over accusations of sexual assault. His defence lawyer says he could face the death penalty if sent to the United States on separate charges relating to the whistleblowing website. Let's go live to Lawrence Lee, who's at the court in London. This was the biggest story in the world not long ago, wasn't it, Lawrence? And obviously other events have overtaken. Just bring us up to date with how Julian Assange got to here and what happened yesterday.
Yeah, today's the second day of this two-day extradition hearing, and what we saw yesterday, and it'll continue today, is his defence team basically trying to undermine the case against him. They produced 2 witnesses yesterday afternoon. The first, a former Swedish judge who they brought in to undermine the credibility of the prosecutor in Sweden who issued the arrest warrant against him. This former judge claimed that, in her opinion, the prosecutor in Sweden was essentially a man-hater who had malicious intent. They produced a second witness then who tried to undermine the credibility of at least one of the alleged rape victims. And this guy, who was a blogger and activist from Sweden, said that he'd found some tweets from this woman who said that she had a very nice time with Julian Assange. The next day went out to dinner with him and agreed to become his press officer. And then a few days after that changed the story entirely and alleged rape. And so they're trying to dismantle, if you like, the prosecution case. They say they're going to produce 2 more witnesses today. One assumes much in the same sort of vein. Clearly their concern past this sort of muddying of the reputations of these people is primarily that if he did go to Sweden, then first of all, any rape court case against him will be held in secret. And they say that would be unfair and wouldn't constitute open justice. But they're also deeply concerned, as you say, that if he was locked up in Sweden, it would make it far easier for the Americans then to extradite him to the United States, where his supporters and protesters say he could end up in Guantanamo or worse on things like spying charges.
Well, this is the thing. Everything that's happening where you are is actually nothing to do with WikiLeaks. Does Assange and his team try to relate that to everyone and say this is not about my reputation, this is actually about just trying to get me for this WikiLeaks stuff?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Julian Assange himself has said in the past that he's far less concerned about the rape claims against him than what the Americans might have in store. And if, you know, there are groups of protesters, young people, primarily at the gates of the court and the prison here, wearing Guantanamo jumpsuits and masks and all this sort of thing. You know, they don't look like the kind of people who believe in aliens. But if you ask them, is this a CIA conspiracy, the whole rape thing, they will say, yes, absolutely it is. So, you know, if the whole thing was made up as a Hollywood blockbuster, then you'd barely believe it.
I think it may yet be a Hollywood blockbuster, Lawrence. Lawrence Lee, live for us there at Belmarsh. Thank you. Let's turn our attention to weather matters. Everton Fox with us. Everton, Sri Lanka. I mean, there's been big floods in other parts of the world, but this is the one that's kind of just kept going on the whole time.
That's right, Kamal. Yeah, we had a brief respite just towards the end of last month, but the rains have returned with a vengeance. This is coming off the back of what was the wettest January on record, and those records go back nearly 100 years, so an incredible amount of rainfall. And if you take that period from the beginning of December to the middle of January, we were looking at 1,600 millimetres of rainfall in only 6 weeks. That's around a year's worth in only 6 weeks. I'm afraid those rains have returned.
As the fog hangs warily over London, we can always offer you the perfect pick-me-up.
So the rains have returned, and they really have returned with a vengeance. You can see this large area of thunderheads affecting Sri Lanka. Some parts have seen around 400 millimetres of rainfall over the last 8 days. So since the beginning of February, as I said, coming off the back of what was an extremely wet January. Little wonder we do have flooding. Little wonder we will see further flooding over the coming days. And there's that wet weather to come through the course of Wednesday. Thursday, little change. If anything, it nudges a little further southwards, but it will remain very disturbed across Sri Lanka over the next few days. In fact, the rainy season still got another 6 weeks or so to go. Further north, here it is fine and dry through a good part of India. Few wintry flurries up to the foothills of the Himalayas. Notice some cloud just making its way into Pakistan, into Afghanistan. That's just pulling away from Iran, actually. And I think even here in Qatar, we may even see some rainfall as we go through the latter part of Tuesday into Wednesday. Wednesday, we'll see that rainfall slowly but surely starting to push away. I suspect for Bahrain, for example, you could see some heavy downpours here. But for much of the Arabian Peninsula, it is generally set fair with temperatures creeping up into the mid-20s. Set fair too for a good part of South Africa. A few showers across the eastern side of the country. Heaviest rainfall will continue into Mozambique, southern parts of Tanzania and Madagascar.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
Everton, thank you for that. Plenty more ahead on the News Hour. News from Asia, actually, where they're making progress. North and South Korea holding their first talks since November's deadly shelling. And tough times for Toyota. Japan's largest car maker reports a slump in sales, but there is a silver lining. We'll tell you about that and plenty more in a moment.
Malaysian ingenuity has created amongst the world's greenest, most cost-efficient buildings. It's created the world's tallest self-installing wellhead platform, designed the largest and most advanced racecourses, and constructed the most futuristic Formula One racing circuits. When the world needs services of the highest caliber and creativity, they look to Malaysia. Service excellence.